From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressy.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressy, and this is episode 104. Today's guest is a major league pitcher who has experience as both a starter and a reliever, so you can share some insights on the preparation that goes along with both of those responsibilities. Also, a really cool story of a late bloomer from South Florida who kind of came around a little bit later in his career after being more undersized, and his velocity didn't really trend up until late in the game. So cool story of, not just a stud pitcher who got overused in his teenage years, but one that took a long-term approach, and it's really benefited him greatly. He's a member of our pro off-season crew at Cressy Sports Performance Florida, and one of the really well-liked guys in the game. So we're in for a really good episode here. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients through the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressy to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressy and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressy, CRESSEY. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who was born and raised in South Florida. He was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles in the 11th round of the 2010 MLB draft, but chose to attend Oral Roberts University instead of signing. As a junior at Oral Roberts, he put up a 1.83 ERA over 113 innings with 126 strikeouts and only 26 walks. He was drafted by the Texas Rangers with the 23rd overall pick of the 2013 MLB draft and made his major league debut with Texas on May 30th, 2015. In that game against the Boston Red Sox, he went the first 5 2/3 innings without surrendering a hit and picked up his first career win. It was the longest no-hit stretch to begin a career for a Rangers pitcher since 1992. Just a week later, he threw a complete game shutout against the Kansas City Royals. He was diagnosed with a partial tear in his UCL in the spring of 2017 and had Tommy John that July, leading him to miss the entire 2017 and 2018 seasons. After a successful winter ball stint in December of 2018, he signed a minor league deal with the Colorado Rockies, where he returned to the big leagues in June of 2019. He started up as a CSP Florida athlete last offseason and has been a regular in the Rockies starting rotation through 2021 with some relief appearances along the way. Please welcome to the show, Chichi Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us, Chichi. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It took about 105 episodes, but you are our first guest named Chichi. A very important box that we had to check along the way to elite baseball development stardom. Um, and I have always enjoyed our conversations. You're a dedicated part of the 8:30 a.m. crew, the dad crew at CSP Florida in the off season. Directly after kiddo drop off, you come in and get after it. So I think you're going to be a really good guest here. So I want to talk about being a youth slash high school baseball player in South Florida, just because that can mean a lot of different things, right? It can be the guy that was like baseball only 150 innings every year from age 8 on, or we'll see some multi-sport guys. What was your kind of approach that led you up to high school baseball?
So I was mainly baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I was mainly baseball through from little league, t-ball,
Mhm.
5 years old to high school. I did play a little basketball in middle school
Mhm.
because we didn't have a baseball team at the time.
Mhm.
So I would just play travel baseball and then school year basketball.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't have much experience with other sports just because of schooling wise. The school I went to was Alexander D. Henderson,
Mhm.
like the FAU little middle school.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they didn't have many sports teams, so that's what I was doing there when I was, in middle school.
Absolutely. And so actually, I'm curious. I know you're of Cuban descent.
Mhm.
Did you have a lot of like traditional Cuban baseball, kind of I guess influence in did you have a lot of people in your family that were really passionate about it, or how did like your love of the game come about?
Yeah, 100% from, being Hispanic, being
Yeah.
Cuban. Um, my grandparents played
Mhm.
growing up. They understood the game.
Mhm.
My mom's a fanatic of the game.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I grew up right by that Bucky Dent baseball school
Yeah.
in Delray Beach. So, it was just easy. I literally would just walk across the railroad tracks, and there I was at the baseball field.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was just a big part of it. Yeah, Cubans are really known for boxing and playing baseball.
Mhm.
I was given a baseball glove as my first gift
Mhm.
from one of my mother's friends, and I just took to it. I guess it was just natural for me because of that heritage,
Mhm.
and I really enjoyed the game.
That's awesome, and I'm intrigued. So you're a good high school player, and traditionally like the strong high school players, particularly those that wind up getting drafted out of high school, like they fall in love with the Florida States, they fall in love with Florida, Miami's, like a lot of the you grow up expecting to do that, and you end up at Oral Roberts. What led you to Oral Roberts? Is a destination.
Yeah, so through high school, I wasn't the biggest, strongest. My senior year, I did grow a little bit and gain some weight. But I committed my junior year. That was
Mhm.
kind of like my thing,
Yeah.
was to commit early my junior year to Division One. That was
Hmm.
the plan that I said to my baseball coach at the
Hmm.
time, just Justin Timmerman. And when I told him that, he mentioned Oral Roberts to me because he was a volunteer there
Hmm.
years prior. And I didn't think about it too much because my goals were just to stay in state. My dream school was to go to University of Miami.
Hmm.
So I would do all those winter camps and all those fall ball camps um, there. But he really mentioned to me, it's really important for you to play.
Hmm.
You can go to these big Division Ones, Florida State, University of Florida, but they're gonna have a structure of juniors and seniors that have developed and are gonna play more time. As a freshman, you're not gonna get, you might get a couple innings out of the bullpen, but starting wise, you got to go somewhere that you will play. So, I thought about it and then I looked up the school. And at the time, it was Rob Walton was the head coach.
Hmm.
And he had a ton of credentials with, Olympic teams and coaching guys that were, in college, got better, got to the draft, played professional baseball. Um, so I had no doubt of, that he would make me better. But the biggest factor of going to Oral Roberts was the fact that I was going to be able to pitch my freshman year.
I love that.
Yeah.
I had a similar conversation with Corey Kluber about that. That's one of the things that led him to Stetson. And I think parents and kids often overlook it's good to be wanted too.
Yes.
There's somebody said they're more invested in you if you were in their plans right away. I know I'm
Yeah, I
inherently
mean,
more
yeah.
invested in people that I've had a role in like onboarding in some capacity. So I think there's something to be said about that. Would you define yourself as like a late bloomer in high school? Was that something that you think maybe didn't, bring those, those high level D1s, like they didn't come calling early, or did things change senior year for you? Or kind of how did it progress over your high school years?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I didn't throw a ball past 90 until my senior year of high school.
Hmm.
And then senior summer, I was even touching up to 94. But yeah, I think it's just developmental, mature, getting some strength under my legs. Um, but yeah, I definitely would describe myself as a late bloomer because that senior summer, I did have, UCF, University of Florida,
Hmm.
calling my parents, emailing my parents on, opportunities, preferred walk on type of things.
Hmm.
But I stuck to, my original commitment was to Oral Roberts my junior year. They gave me a full ride. So I had nothing to lose essentially going to Oral Roberts. Yeah, and I think the biggest factor was that opportunity to pitch.
Well
My
done.
freshman year I threw about 100 innings, and then I also got to play in the Cape Cod League,
Absolutely.
to which I got another like 20 innings. So I think that was a huge part of my developing was, just the chance to play.
Absolutely. So I'm curious. You were still drafted out of high school, so you obviously surged forward your senior. You went in the 11th round of the Orioles, but you didn't
Yes.
you didn't sign. So was that a hard decision to sign versus not sign, or because 11th round is not just like a pat on the butt in the 39th round that they would do in those days for kids they knew were going to college. They obviously had substantial interest in you.
Yeah, yeah. It was a very hard decision. Um, it was go to college because it was a university. I would have to wait 3 years until I was 21 to be drafted again or
Hmm.
begin my pro ball career. Yeah, it was definitely a tough challenge or decision. But I don't think if I would have made any decision would have been wrong.
Yeah,
But I was happy that I did commit to Oral Roberts, go there for 3 years. I grew spiritually as well as I got my foot into the door of college.
hmm,
Haven't finished my degree, but at least I started it.
absolutely. So I'm curious. When I went back and looked at some of your college numbers, one of you mentioned obviously getting innings early on. Looking back at it, you threw 105 innings, and then that was in 2011. 2012, you threw 86 innings, and you went to the Cape after both of those.
Hmm.
But what was really intriguing to me, in particular, was between 2012 and 2013, from your sophomore to your junior years, you went to a career high in innings, right? You threw 113 innings your junior year. But what I thought was interesting is the top end velo. You were a 93, 94 guy with your max velo, but your average velo went from being like an 88, 89 to being like 91.5. So it wasn't that like the ceiling got higher, but it seemed like you brought the floor up substantially with respect to like how you carried velo throughout outing. Was there a big change, whether it's mechanically, workload wise, or how you attacked your prep between sophomore and junior year, or do you think it was just growing in your body a little bit, being more comfortable with your mechanics? What was it that made you so good as a junior compared to what you were as a freshman and sophomore?
Yeah, I think it's just more so like workload, how you talked about, like lifting wise, finding a good routine. Um, yeah, and just carrying that into that season. For sure, I was my strongest at my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
We worked our legs most, a lot of conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
and it was almost that time of the year, that year, that it was okay. Here's where I got to make it,
Mm-hmm.
so I can go move on to that next level.
Yep.
Um, so I think that in the back of my mind kind of pushed me a little harder than the years prior.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a little injury in my sophomore year to my back. That's why I didn't
Mm-hmm.
throw as many innings.
Okay.
But yeah, I was able to go to the Cape, and essentially continue to get to that 100th inning. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just the that strength and conditioning part
Mm-hmm.
that changed my body the most, and was like you're saying, was made my arm and my body conditioned to carry that velocity throughout the game.
So you're listed at 6'3", 210. What were you when you left high school, and what were you when you were a junior in college?
I mean, when I left high school, I probably was 5'10", 5'11", maybe 160 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I know college, my sophomore year, I think because of the injury, I was a little heavier. I was like 190.
Mm-hmm.
But even when I was drafted, to the Rangers, I still was around 195.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like the goal when I was drafted to the Rangers, was to, I proved myself in college, inning wise, workload. The next 2 months is, get a couple more innings to get you acclimated to pro ball,
Yep.
but was to focus on, gaining some more weight
Mm-hmm.
and strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I'm intrigued if you had to go back and do your scouting report, right? So, obviously, physicality changed quite a bit. What was the difference between, being an 11th rounder out of high school versus being a first round pick, 23rd overall pick, just a couple years later? Was it just that it was more of you didn't have to dream on it as much because it had filled out, the velo was more consistent, and you had shown the durability, or were you a markedly different pitcher in terms of your repertoire and how you attacked hitters?
It was kind of a combination of both. For sure was the proving the workload. In high school you might throw whatever it is, 40 innings, in a season.
Mm-hmm.
And in college it was the big jump of, every outing, especially at Oral Roberts, I was a Friday night guy or the Saturday night guy.
Yeah, when
So
I
it
looked at the
was
numbers, it was like 7 2/3, 8 innings, pretty much every time out your junior year. It looked
exactly,
like.
yeah. And it was, the world's different now.
Yeah.
Those outings were 120 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
Every 7 days. So
Mm-hmm.
that's more understandable. Here, pro ball is every fifth day, so it's a
Yep.
little bit more controlled. Um, but yeah, in college it was, I was with Rob being my coach. It was, he that's how he coached, was, here's the ball, I'm taking it away when the game's over, essentially. Yeah. So I was super content with that, because even in high school, it's 6 innings, I would throw the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already kind of used to that, that mark. But when I proved to him that, I was the guy that, here's the ball, take it over. I took that approach into pro ball as well. I want that ball every fifth day,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna go as long as I can.
Do you think, to some degree, I know you mentioned being kind of a baseball only guy, although basketball, to some degree offset that. Do you think it was a blessing in disguise that you were such a late bloomer, that it probably protected you from an era where there were a lot of kids that threw a ton of innings, but with you being 82, 84 as a sophomore in high school, like you didn't maybe see as many, crazy usage scenarios. And just, coming into your own as a sophomore in college was probably like the best thing for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I was always, uh, on a team because I had a good arm.
Yeah.
Uh, for instance, Mike Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
He's another South Florida Boynton Beach kid. Um, he threw hard ever since he picked up a ball.
Mm-hmm.
So he was that guy that was abused as young in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I believe it carried over into his career, essentially. So yeah, being that late bloomer was a blessing in disguise, because it was, I wasn't abused by younger coaches. Things have changed so much more.
Yeah.
You know, things have changed incredibly different for the better.
Mm-hmm.
For protecting kids and their careers or future. But yeah, for instance, that guy, like him, he was hard throwing, and he just enjoyed the game. So it wasn't, he didn't think about that as much. But I think later on it did come back and creep up on him. And yeah, I guess so. That was a blessing in disguise for me, being that late bloomer, that, I wasn't so abused as younger.
And I've talked to the number of late bloomers at the big league level. I don't think people appreciate just how many big leaguers were. They were good players in high school, but they weren't front and center. I think there are a lot more guys that come into their own a little bit later. But in that same vein, what were the adjustments? So obviously you get drafted, you're a first round pick, and there were adjustments that happened between high school and college. But what were the ones that took you from being a first round pick to being a guy who was, who became a big leaguer and, had to work to establish himself as a regular big leaguer? How did the, pitch mix, the approach, all that stuff change over the course of those years?
Yeah, being the first rounder kind of ended as soon as I pitched my first game.
Yeah.
It was, there's no more hype anymore. It's, if you perform, you move on. If you don't, that's it, type of thing. You get stuck to where you're at. So that was kind of like the biggest understanding adjustment. I had a little pressure on myself being, first rounder.
Yeah.
I got to throw hard. I got to perform so good. Teammates even see it as well. But yeah, once I understood that was, it don't matter who you were, who you come from, you got to figure out what you're doing now. And I think that was my biggest adjustment, especially when I got promoted to Double A. The game, every step as you go, the game gets faster.
Mhm.
That's what I continue to tell people, velocity wise, people running, batters against you, yourself. And it's that ability of being able to slow it down. Because at the end of the day, it's baseball.
Yeah.
It's the same game you played when you grew up till now. Same rules, just a little longer. Instead of 7 innings, 5 innings, it's 9.
Mhm.
So it's just the ability to be able to concentrate for longer.
One of the things I'm actually really curious about, because I've had different conversations with guys over the years. What was the biggest step? You know what I mean? What was there was it high A to double A to triple A to the big leagues? Where do you feel like, there was this, crazy incremental increase in just the challenge of competing?
It was like it's pretty much AAA and the big leagues because you get a mix of family men, adults
Mhm.
that it's pretty much their lives to put food on their table.
Mhm.
So that's how they take it. Especially when you get to AAA, you see that those older veteran guys that there's no fooling around. There's no more of this hanging out, partying. It's business.
Yeah.
Come to the field, perform, shower, leave, and you do the same thing the next day. So once I got to AAA, I experienced that more because I think I was younger. I was about 24 when I got to AAA with the Rangers, and those guys had 34-year-olds, 35-year-olds in AAA that were those 4A guys, back and forth, free agents signed, with out clauses and this and that. But that was the biggest difference was AAA and the big leagues was, either you perform or you move on. So that was that big jump.
Interesting. So for you also, like you still throw, you throw 5 different pitches, right? You got a 2 and a 4 seam, you got a curveball, you got a slider, as well as a changeup. Did this happen over the course of time? Like, was it just that there was a subtle addition? Were you always a guy that was able to manipulate the baseball in a lot of different ways from a young age? How did you get to such a broad pitch mix that made you a big league starter?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, it was just I had pretty decent velo, so it was pretty much fastball. A lot of 4 seams and occasionally a changeup. I had a good mentor, younger coach, through those years that were, hey, we're not going to throw a breaking ball until you're 14. Kind of that new era of developing and thinking of kids' careers and lives. And then once I got into college, high school I had a little breaking ball, nothing great. It was like a slurve. But in college is when I was shown and taught a true slider. And through college, I was able to survive with just a fastball and a slider.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then once I made the jump into pro ball, it was you gotta start manipulating things, cutting it, sinking it, and change ups. Because these big league hitters can they time up jets. Essentially, that's what was the first quote that was told to me. Yeah, they're always ready for a fastball, and that's what they crush our mistakes. Um, but yeah, so once I got into my first level was a short season in Spokane. It was developing a changeup.
Mhm.
So then that's when I had a fastball, a 2 seam, or 4 seam, 2 seam, slider, and a changeup. And that got me up to pretty much double A. Double A, and everything I threw was pretty hard. My fastball topped up to 94. My slider was around 85. And the changeup was the same, 85, just moved different directions.
Mhm.
And then once I got to double A and triple A, it was okay. Now we needed to have something with drastic speed change.
Mhm.
And I could not figure it out how to do it with my slider. So our double A pitching coach, Jeff, was the one of, hey, let's create a curveball. You know, and I still was throwing it very hard, about 82. So his goal was to all about changing speeds. Throw a pitch that you can steal a strike or change your eye levels, etc. So right in AAA big leagues is I still am manipulating baseball for a curveball. That's probably my fifth best pitch. But you still got to throw it, especially being a starter.
Is your mindset? And I'm probably going to touch on this a little bit later, but I spoke to another pretty accomplished big leaguer who once told me that he has all his pitches in one bucket, and then the curveball is in a completely different bucket. That the mentality is 100% different, and he's a guy who throws both the curveball and a slider. Is it? Do you view things the same way? Like, was it that big of a shift to add that pitch late in the game, or did it feel like another pitch where you could trust the grip and just rip it?
Yeah, no, early on it was a totally different world. Yeah, totally different world because I was always, everything with aggression, everything fast hand. And developing the curveball was so important on feel. And the way I created feel was, with essentially slowing movement, slowing my arm down, making sure my wrist is in the right spot to spin the ball correctly. But yeah, it took me a while, man. It took me, a AAA season pretty much to understand, I don't have to throw every single pitch at my hardest. It was, it's more of deception, make sure my body is moving the same and my arm is in the same spot to create an illusion, to create a batter thinking, hey, this is a fastball.
So maybe on that same, kind of in that same vein, so you're a guy that uses both a two seam and a four seam. And right before you came on, I pulled the numbers. Your two seam's 16%, your four seam's 37% of your usage. And, they're about 90 RPM difference in terms of spin rate, and they're differentiated in terms of their movement profiles, both with how they break vertically and horizontally. But I'm sure there's a tendency for them to at times blend a little bit. I'm sure that when Trapman or Hawkeye looks at it, that there are times when they perceive a four seam as a two or vice versa. So I'm actually more curious, like, what are your mindsets with each? Like, is it trust the grip and rip down on it, or what do you tell yourself when you throw a four seam, and what do you tell yourself when you throw a two seam?
Yeah, four seam for sure is get the grip and rip it. Just because that's what you play catch with. Essentially, pick up a ball, you start throwing it, you're throwing a four seam. And we've been doing it for so long, so that's very trusted pitch. Opposed to the sinker two seam.
Do you treat it as a sinker, or is it a running fastball? How do you describe
I treat it? Honestly, pitching in Denver.
Good point.
Yeah, it's incredible to talk about, but it's a true. People have say it, and you see it in numbers and pitch shape wise and on TV. But yeah, at home in Denver, I would say it's more of a running fastball. And then when on the road with less elevation, more humidity, it is a sinker. And it's also dependent on where you throw it in the zone. If I'm throwing it up, it runs a little bit more just because I'm underneath the ball more. And if I'm throwing it down in the zone, I'm on top of it more. But yeah, it's incredible that I'm saying that, but it is honestly true about your two different pitchers. Your ball moves two different ways when you're at home in Denver opposed to on the road.
Interesting. You're not the first person I've heard that from. And Ottavino was on the podcast a long time ago, and he spoke to it. And I know we've had good conversations with various guys over the years that feel like they need to start their breaking ball at a different point when they're at altitude. So when you're talking about differentiating them, like, what is it about a two seam that for you feels like dramatically different in terms of how you manipulate it? Like, it's not a four seam in your mind. What is the difference?
The difference is pressure. I'm very middle finger dominant. So I think it's just through college because I threw so many sliders that I'm very middle finger dominant. So when I do throw a two seam, I try to concentrate on a little bit more pressure on my index, or even when I'm at release, having my index pointing at the catcher.
Okay.
Opposed to more so, four seam, my middle finger just ripping down on it.
Mm-hmm. And will you feel like the four seam will you have some natural cut on that that helps you, or is it something that you've been able to actually like get a true backspin on?
Yeah, I think my whole life, because even when I was drafted out of high school, scouts always talk to me. Oh, you throw a cut fastball. Is that grip wise, or is that just natural? I think it's just the way my wrist works.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had that kind of like my whole career, little cut in my fastball. It's beneficial sometimes. Sometimes it's not. I could count a dozen times on when it's not, when I'm trying to go inside on a four seam and it cuts back to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But opposed to, when I'm facing a lefty, I throw it inside and it's perfect and it runs right into their, jams them.
Yeah.
So the only time that really has hurt me is more so on my arm side.
Okay.
Going inside to righties or away to lefties, just because it may leak back more towards the middle.
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful about coaching the different out of people. Like sometimes it's that little bit of funk that makes somebody have a little bit of movement. And we're in an era now where you have the technology to say, all right, that's not 100% spin efficiency fastball. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that might want to overhaul it. The other thing is, we don't know how your system's going to adjust if you try to make that a really true four seam. Like, how are you going to beat up on your shoulder and elbow trying to reorient something that you've habituated to over the course of 20 plus years of throwing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like that's what the little difference is in my fastball than others, is that little cut in it. So it's just the ability of me, making less mistakes with it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, my goal every time I throw a pitch is not to throw one straight.
I like it.
Yeah. Movement is key, and movement was what made Greg Maddux the best,
Mm-hmm.
And precision, obviously, the controlling the strike zone. But yeah, my goal is just whenever I throw any type of pitch is never to be flat and straight, have tilt, angle, and movement in it. And then just mastering that.
So how do the curveball and the slider differentiate? How do you, what are the mindsets on both of those?
Those, grip wise, it's a little different. Grip wise and intent wise. With the slider, I try to extend and throw it as hard as I can and spin it with that little gyro dot.
Mm-hmm.
Opposed to the curveball is, I try to lock my wrist and have it go more so, I guess, more efficient spin, top to bottom. So I get more depth, and that helps me slow down the speed.
Mm-hmm. And let's just change gears a little bit. So talk to me about kind of your in-season training and throwing schedule. I know you alluded like, hey, I could push volume on a 7-day rotation in college, and we both know a lot of guys get to pro ball, and that adjustment from a 7-day to a 5-day rotation it's a big deal. You kind of just get used to pitching at 90%. What do you do with your 5-day rotation to stay fresh?
Yeah, I mean, I just listen to myself. Listen to my body. There's days that I'm supposed to do a lower lift, but my knees barking or my hips are too tight, that I just focus on movement. But yeah, that's one of the things that is consistent in my routine is flexibility, movement through every motion that I do, and it's just having a consistent like warm up essentially. And I honestly learned that with you. This off season was, it's not just coming in, do the hip mobility stuff because you say so. No, it's understanding why this is for me, and making it part of your daily routine. But yeah, so I think that little warm up routine is the most important in my 5-day regimen, because I've been starting this year and I've been pushed into the bullpen as well.
So you've seen both. You be ready at all times. So it becomes a daily prep type thing.
Exactly. So there's being a reliever, strength and lifting wise, is not on a schedule. Starting, yes, it is, because every 5th day you'll get that ball.
Absolutely.
Reliever, it's understanding yourself, understanding your workload, understanding how your arm feels, your body, everything wise. So, I mean, I even see it through Kinley. Kinley would have to be the best example put a camera on that guy, and this is how you're a reliever. This is how you become a great reliever.
Mhm.
And it starts with his warm-ups.
Yeah.
He's so committed, so concentrated on every single breath he takes, essentially,
Mhm.
in that little 15-day or 15-minute warm-up. But yeah, I think that would be the biggest difference that I've learned in these past couple years has been, you know, prepping your body to lift, prepping your body to throw. As young, you're just young, you're fresh, you're ready to go at all times. Come age, that's when I guess wisdom and experience comes into play. As in, prepping is so important. Getting those muscle joints loose, stretched out, so an injury doesn't occur.
I think there's so much that's uncontrollable about being a reliever. Like you don't know
Yes.
what the way the game is going to go. As a starter, you're going to take the ball, and you largely dictate the flow of the game.
Yes.
So you control the controllables, and there aren't many of them as a reliever. But daily warm ups and just saying, all right, I'm going to lift on the second game of every series, no matter what. You just
Exactly.
have something that you can fall back on. When you are on that 5 day rotation, how do you attack both your throwing and your lifting schedule within that 5 day block? Are you a day 2, a day 3 pen? How do you usually structure it?
Yeah, so the 5 day, I'll pitch on, so I'll pitch. The next day, I'll come in and I'll do a
Mhm.
lower body lift. And it pretty much consists of a split squat,
Mhm.
just so I get into my hips and strengthen individual legs. Um, so I'll do a split squat and then like an explode series of jumping, um, and or like a um, 90-90 hip cars type of
Mhm.
thing. Yeah, because I'm just always into my hips. We're always into our hips rotating.
Mhm.
So that's what gets tight the most on me are my hips. So for every lift I do, I kind of do an explosion and also as well stretch.
Mhm.
And then catch play. First day, it all depends on how my arm feels.
Yep.
Some days it feels better than others. But this late, like early on, I'm able to go, first day up to 120 feet of light catch.
Mhm.
Nothing strenuous. Probably at about 60% at max, just getting some
Mhm.
air under the ball.
Yep.
Um, and then I will probably won't. I don't spin any early on. I will early on in the season. I'll spin a couple pitches, a couple sliders, just to get the feel of it. Um, and then later on in the season, everything kind of just gets pushed back a tad.
Mhm.
Uh, and then day 2, I am a day 2 bullpen guy.
Mhm.
Day 2, I'll come in and I'll throw a bullpen about 20-25 pitches with all my pitches. And then we'll see like from the start before if I was tipping on a pitch or anything like that. We'll communicate and talk during the bullpen on that.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, and that pen day I throw a little less. I probably get out to 100 feet just
Mhm.
because I want to use more of my effort in the bullpen more so than catch play.
Mhm.
Um, then I'll do an upper body lift on that day 2,
Yep.
which is a bench in a row, and then shoulder care, which consists of bands or light weights or even some manual stuff. I
Mhm.
really enjoy the manual just because you get feedback
Mhm.
uh, from
Absolutely.
the trainer. Yeah, the trainer doing it, and it's way more controlled.
Yep.
Uh, then day three, or I'll do the little on day 1. I should go back to day 1 conditioning running wise. Just a couple sprints.
Mhm.
Just straightforward sprints to get little movement in my legs after that lift, some catch play,
Mhm.
and then get my legs going again. Day 2 running wise, I will do a cut, so like a 5. What is it? A 5 and a 10
Mhm. Yep.
little shuffle and then sprint. I'll do that about 8 times. So that's the running wise. And then day 3, uh, I concentrate on core and movement. A lot of core and stretching. Um, just to get all the sorenesses out from the bullpen and the
Yep.
workouts.
Yep.
And then catch play, same thing. I'll get out to about 200 feet. Day 3 depends on that bullpen how I feel. I'll get out a little further, about 200 feet. I'll do a little bit more long toss
Mhm.
on day 3, just because at that point your body should be fully recovered.
Yep.
And then running, I'll do interval. I'll go, I think it's 20 yards, and then I'll come back, and then I'll rest, the double the time, however it took me
Yep.
to run that sprint.
Okay.
Then day 4, um, day 4 is light catch. So about to 90 feet, no lift, still with the same warm up and movement wise, but less workload on that day. And then it's more like video and getting ready for my start.
Absolutely.
Scouting type of stuff.
There's some good stuff in there in the sense that
Yeah.
if you think about the way like a 5-day rotation is, you've got to find recovery at some point. And you either you follow a high-low model where you try to get a recovery on day 1 or day 2, or you have a approach where you can kind of, to some degree, like blow it out between day 0 and day 2, where you get all your work in, and then you have kind of those 2 lower key days on day 3 and day 4 to bounce back before day 5. And there's different ways to attack it. And it's probably something you've learned by trial and error of how much you can push on the front end without being exhausted by the time day 5 rolls around again.
Yeah. Awesome. No, yeah. I mean, that's all it's been. It's been trial and error, watching other guys, talking to other guys about it. And it's honestly mostly just talking to other guys because, yes, being in college, it was kind of just told, hey, this is how you're supposed to do it. Once I got into pro ball, it was, hey, figure it out. And that's when I guess the older guys and the more experienced guys come into fluidity. And very important, just, watching them or communicating with them on, hey, how did you do it? How did you last so long in your career? And no one's going to have the right answer. Everyone's so much different. And they all pivot over the course of a career with what they do and how it adjusts. So that's the most important thing, is staying open-minded to different principles. Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, those are the most coachable people. That's it. That's the name of the game. Are the open-minded, the ones that are be able to change, and the ones that understand why you're changing. Nice. All right. So we always, at the end, we go to like a lightning round. So the first question we ask all of our pro guys: what advice would you give to a teenage Chichi Gonzalez if you could go back in time? Just concentrate what you got at hand. Don't worry about what happened or what's going to happen. Today's the day. Win today and enjoy today. Nice. And then I'm actually really intrigued on this one because we've asked a lot of big leaguers, and I feel like we've gone 50-50 on the responses. What's more important, stuff or command? I would say command. All right. Yeah, command 100%. There you go. There's no wrong answer on that. Yeah. I mean, I know you could either go either way because people that have the stuff might say command, and the people that have the command might say the stuff. That's the truth. And then favorite teammate of all time and why? Favorite teammate. You're gonna hurt some feelings. You got some good dudes in that clubhouse. I know, man. I mean, I got to experience him with the Rangers and Rockies, and he's helped me out. I mean, mentally, confidence, everything, and it's been Ian Desmond. Yeah, he's been through a lot too. Being a shortstop, being a first baseman, outfielder. He's the guy to talk about adjustments. But yeah, I would say he's a great father. He's got, I believe 3 or 4 kids. There you go. Loves them to death. He reminds everyone about that. Family's first. And he's very vocal. A lot of people are follow by example, but he's a true leader. He expresses his leadership, and I've learned a lot from that. That's awesome. All right, and then the last one: what pitchers do you like to watch, and why do you like to watch them? My guy right now is Charlie Morton, man. Yeah, he's timeless, isn't he? Wow, man. He's he's just an older guy that still's got the stuff. I got to see him one-on-one the other day against us. He did his thing. He's like a rotational pitcher like I am. It's incredible how he's able to, perform like that every 5th day and be the age that he is. Yeah, and then reinvented himself. I think he had bilateral hip surgery in the past, so pretty cool story to see him doing what he's doing. So, hey man, this was awesome.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I feel like we chat 5 mornings a week all off season, and I learned some stuff that I didn't get just from those conversations. So maybe I need to bring more like scripted questions to our hangout sessions all off season. But folks can find you on Twitter. It's at Alex Gonzalez Chi, CHI at the end, and then on Instagram it's at Alex Gonzalez Chi 92.
Yes.
You're the man. Thanks so much for doing this. I really enjoyed it. And
appreciate it.
We'll see you very soon, bud.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.